Good evening and welcome. This is Kirk Miller, and I'm here with my friend Miss Dee. How are you doing, Dee?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Okay. It's a pleasure. Thank you for being here. The reason we're doing this tonight is because Craig, unfortunately, is sick today, and he can't be with us, and he's asked us to fill in, and there are big shoes to fill in, but we're going to do our best. And what I, at the spur of the moment, what I put together, I think you will be helpful to your journey. And we're going to cover three areas. I'm going to first, I was speaking to Dee a little earlier, and Dee, remember I said I had found a new verse that's my favorite verse, and it's in Shemuth. It's names, it's called Exodus, but Shemuth is names. And it's 19:5, and I was going to read that to you because I just thought it was so good. And I want to keep it in the context of when it was written. This is dictation that Moshe was taking on Mount Chorb from Yahweh. So it's Yahweh's words, and he wrote them down. And I would like to start there, if I may. It says, because it encapsulates, just a brief moment, it encapsulates the same message from the start. And if you want a relationship with Yahweh, observe, read, think about the offer, the terms and conditions of being part of the covenant family. Then if you're on free will, Yahweh's gift to you is free. It's freedom of choice. If you want to be part of his family, choose to accept it, or if you choose to, you're equally allowed to reject it. Now, the thing about this statement that I'm about to read is if Yahweh changes his statements, and you can weigh in on this if you like to, Dee. If Yahweh changes his statements, then Yahweh would be unreliable, untrustworthy, or even unlovable.
Yeah.
Because what he's about to say is these are the terms and conditions. And if they change, then why trust him at all? It's always religious relationship. Mm-hmm. Oh, of course. If you look at the Talmud, that's totally man's diversion from the Torah. The New Testament, there is no testimony. It may be a New Testimony, but it ain't about Yahweh. The Quran the same. Or if you have Lenin and Marx, they came up with their version of how to run the world. And that became a religion of socialism, social secular humanism. But in any case, let's get into it because I think it's just wonderful. And now, if you genuinely and consistently and demonstrably listen to my voice, that's from Shama, to listen, and closely examine and carefully consider that which is associated with my covenant, of course that's Shamar. Simple words. There's nothing in here that's complicated or difficult for anyone to look up in lexicons and come up with this translation. Mm-hmm. Then you will be able to approach me and be with me as a highly valued, set apart, which is Kodesh, set apart, protected, and treasured commodity, distinct and separate from all other people, even though the entire world is mine. This is Yahweh talking. Then you yourself shall actually and continually exist as a realm of ministerial messengers and counselors, and as a people of different ethnicities who are set apart and special, uniquely devoted. These are the words and statements which, to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, and anytime you see that, anytime you see Asher, that's a good translation. It says you should continuously speak to the children who engage and endure with God, Beni Yisrael. The message will never change. All the prophets say the same thing. They're like all good teachers. You go at different angles. You approach it this way and this way and this way till you den it in, until you finally get, this is what Yahweh is trying to tell you. This is the pathway home, and you're welcome. Please take the path. Anyway, that struck me this week. And that was I think it's in the Yobel, in the Moed Mikras under the Yobel, I think it's chapter 2 of volume 7. And I said, wow, that's pretty good. And I wrote it down, and I've been carrying it around with me all week trying to memorize it. I'm terrible about memorizing things, but in any case.
I see here it says Shema, and then...
Shema, yeah. Huh?
Yeah, it's repeated there. It's emphasized. Yeah. Genuinely, consistently, and demonstrably listen.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's and if you I know you can I know you translate, and you know that I translate a little bit, and I if you get a bunch of lexicons and an interlineary, there's some more sophisticated ones that help you on really difficult words, but for the most part, you could go through there and you can see exactly what the English translators apparently don't want you to see, or just are too lazy to write, because these are very straightforward words. Very straightforward.
Yeah. There's very few words I haven't been able to pin down that Craig has translated.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, when I find a couple, and I was dealing with one today because preparing for this show just to be the sidekick, I was having real trouble finding the burning bush, because it's not a I've got English translators. There's a raspberry bush, there's a thorny bush, and there's a bush, and there's a fiery bush, and ain't no bush at all. And obviously he didn't translate it that way. And I went through the normal rounded up the normal group of lexicons, and they all just don't help. And then I finally went through the theological workbook of the Old Testament, and also Jensenius, the Hebrew Chaldean lexicon, which are two heavy-duty things that I keep on my desk. And by George, there it is. The same words, same letters. Yes. And it's a sharp crag, a rock. So the thing that, because I was thinking, well, you could see a fiery bush somewhere. But come on. Mm-hmm. What, does that stop Moshe in his tracks? And then, of course, the voice coming out of it helped. But still, it's a burning rock, and it never stops. And there's fire. Yes. Rocks don't burn. That's a big deal. I mean, Yahweh, when he does, when he shows up.
The desert.
It could be somebody over there cooking dinner. You don't know.
Yep.
But a rock, no, not a rock. So in any case, it's a lot of fun to go through those. Uh-huh. Yeah. So what I wanted to do, I was going to just start in somewhere where we left off last week, but I'm going to be reading from Lo Ruchama, No Mercy, because Craig sent this over. This is what he just translated the last day or two, and he sent a copy over. And I thought it was extremely good, because this is the state that Yisrael and Yehudim are in today. And I thought this sets up very nice. We already know what Moshe said from the very beginning. This is the way home. This is the problem. So if you will allow me, I called out by name. Had Israel listened to God, they would have recognized that their religion was not only precluding them from receiving the blessings Yahweh intended for them, but was also responsible for the litany of debilitating consequences derived from continually antagonizing Him. The past 3,000 years should have been so very different. There would have been no Assyrians, no Babylonians, no Greek, no Roman or Muslim invasions. There would have been no diaspora, no Holocaust, no Judaism, certainly no Christianity, Islam, or communism. Had Israel listened to Yahweh, there would have been no Talmud, no New Testament, no Zohar, no Quran, and no Das Kapital. Oh, what a wonderful world it would have been. Rather than Israel being the most demoralized, demonized, and denounced nation on earth, it would have been more universally praised. So we're going to move in now to But at last, the prophet's whore. This is Hosea, I think it's Hosea 1:6. But at last, the prophet's whore, we conceive again. You know, Hosea, just for a little backdrop, he was told to go marry a whore and give them, and he has children, and he gives them names to tell them as a metaphor for Yisrael. But at last, the prophet's whore, we conceive again, begetting generations of unfaithful children. She conceived again, and she gave birth to a daughter. So he said to him, called her name Lo Ruchama. No mercy, no favor, no compassion for being unlovable. No forgiveness and no benefits from Lo being serving as a negation of Rakam, love and compassion and mercy. Because it will be a long time before I once again perceive as lovable, show mercy towards, or beneficially favor the house of Israel, such that I will lift them up in honor or forgive them. Well, it's been a long, long time. That's 1:6, Hosea 1:6.
Oh, yeah.
Yahweh. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yahweh is announcing that, I think we covered that last week over in Yada Yahowah, where he said, I'm just not going to talk to you anymore. So he's repeating again, This is the deal. Yahweh is announcing to the northern kingdom of Israel, apart from Yehudim, thus 10 of the 12 tribes, that they are no longer lovable. Therefore, until their attitude towards him changes, they will receive neither compassion nor mercy. Furthermore, they would remain unapproachable for a very long time, much longer than you would have expected. For the next 140 generations, in fact, there would be no favors and no forgiveness from God towards Israel. The Israelites would not only be on their own, they would be put out of business. God would cease to speak to them again until later. No support, no respect, no way to rise above the hellish conditions that they were creating for themselves. However, since Yahweh had promised to bless people from every race and every place by way of the covenant he established with Abraham, he would continue to love Yehudah for the sake of his beloved Dod and the remnant of his people. Yah continues saying, yet with the house and family of Yehudah, I will continue to love them, favoring them, and providing forgiveness and mercy through them. I will liberate, I will deliver, and save them as Yahweh their God. However, I will not liberate, deliver, or save them by a bow, by shooting projectiles, or being harsh, by a sword or any kind of weapon, by fighting a war, by horsemen and swift-flying aircraft, or by mobile military vehicles. Yahweh was promising to forgive and favor Israel through Yehudah. And the two most important individuals to emerge from the house of Yehudah, of course, would be Dod and Yosha. They would play different starring roles. One had been and one would be again, while the other would be not for so long. Since Dod is presented as the Son of God and is also referred to as God because he came as light when he returns, and he's like God, and he will destroy the enemies of Israel, he would certainly qualify as the means to Israel's salvation. Additionally, since Yahweh's nephesh soul resides in Yosha, he too would be a part of the far-reaching solution. This is yet another renunciation of Judaism as well as its derivatives, Christianity and Islam, because the God whose name they do not recognize is the source of our salvation. It is something that we have been emphasizing since the beginning. When it comes to knowing God and developing a relationship with him, acknowledging his name is an essential first step. Do you know anybody that's close to Yahweh that doesn't know his name? I don't think so.
No.
It
says his people will know his name. So.
His children know his name. They shout it from the rooftops. So, yeah. He said it 7,000 times in the Torah, Prophet, and Mizmor.
Yeah, I think Craig said it's the most common name in the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms.
It has to be, yeah. Dod is the second, I think. It's about 1,000 or so times.
Yeah.
So I will continue on, if I may. The phrase Yasha by Yahweh, salvation by Yahweh, serves as to explain that Yosha's name, his nature, and his purpose. Since it is Yahweh's soul fulfilling the mikres, his name is the only one which actually matters, and as such, Judaism and Christianity are misnomers. Since it is by fulfilling the mikres, the invitations to be called out and meet with God, that we become immortal, perfected, adopted, enriched, and empowered, Yahweh is not liberating us from the deadly nature of religion through the deployment of arrangements or for fighting battles. And while there will be copious amounts of weapons deployed in horrible wars as we migrate through the last days, no one will be saved by such malfeasance. We humans will be killing one another at a prodigious rate, but that is hardly the path to heaven. When she, back to Hosea, when she had weaned La Rakama, no mercy, no favor, and no compassion as a result of being unloved, she conceived and bore a son. Then he said, announce that his name is La'am Ani, not my people, because you are not part of my family, and I am not your God. This is tough to listen to. If you're Israel, and he's saying this to you, try to put yourself in a place if your dad was saying that to you, and certainly if God was saying that to you.
Yeah, especially when you have like Goyim who claims to be adopted into the family, using it as a bludgeon against you, and you're the original child. It's a frustrating scenario for everyone.
It's tough to take, but if you're listening, this is where Israel is right now. This is where Yehudim are right now, except for a very small few that are on this journey. Are you listening, Israel? You have become so annoying with your perverted religions that Yahweh has disowned you. You have been disinherited. You have been digressed from being unlovable to being orphaned. And it isn't even because God has died, but instead is your fault. You received an engraved invitation that was called the Tablet of Stones, and also the Torah written by Moshe that we just read. You have received an engraved invitation into the covenant, and you desecrated it and you threw it away. How cheap must they have thought this is? Why do people do that? I mean, anyway, without even examining it, they just toss it aside, don't care.
Yeah.
I know it's a rhetorical, but still. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's just obvious. Even Yahweh said he doesn't know why things happen that people do that are insane. I mean, if even Yahweh can't understand it, we certainly can't. But I know rhetorical because it's just sad. There is no explanation.
Yeah. And, Craig goes on to write, consider that the children of Israel, the chosen people, you have become destitute. Worst of all, you worship a God who is not Yahweh, leaving you with no God at all. Introduced to the one true God, you have joined the ranks of those who irritate and annoy him. Yisrael, apart from Yehuda, was entering history's longest intermission, and while God could no longer endure them, he would assure that they would endure long enough to eventually be saved, some, of course. Yet the number of children of Israel shall be as the sands of the sea, because it cannot be counted, numbered, or recorded. And it shall come to pass that in this place where it is said of them, where it is said of them, you are not my family, it shall be said of them, you are the children of the living God. Now that's the opposite. Then the descendants of Yehuda and the children of Israel will be gathered together and be as one. They will appoint for themselves the best one as their leader. And then they will ascend upwards to the higher place of the land, because great, intense, important, and empowering shall be Yom Yarel, the day of God's seeds are sown in Jezreel. Now, this is getting kind of interesting, and I encourage everyone to read this when it's published. I think it's not quite there yet. We just get a little snippet ahead of time sometimes, and I thought it was interesting. It is because we're getting so close. Everything I read about economics, I've tried to become very good at economics and money systems and what's going on in the world and how it relates to these prophecies. We are so close, it's really scary. I don't know how bad we're going to deteriorate before 2029. But it in the commentary it says it was a rapid downward progression. Israel had fallen from being unlovable and undeserving to being disinherited. They were no longer covenant. Having rejected Yahweh, God rejected them. And friends, that's fair. If you don't like me, I don't have to put up with you. In that matter of quantity over quality, they were long on one and deprived of the other. Clearly, God was not running a popularity test. While the downgraded status would plague them for centuries, even millennia, the relationship was slated for resolution. Koporim in the year 6000 Yah was a distinct light on the horizon. Some of the descendants of those who had been ostracized for having become obnoxious restored to fellowship, becoming children of the living God. That rift that had torn them apart would be mended, and Israel and Yehuda would be together again, having been dispersed throughout the nations. They would be collected and gathered in one accord, something that seems unfathomable considering the propensity of Jews to disagree with each other and their God. I do like his commentary. One of the many areas of disagreement would be on their leader, their shepherd, and their Messiah, the Messiah. They would choose the best one, and everyone knows that That is Yahweh's beloved. Dod, in fact, Dod means the beloved. There is only one way to ascend upwards to the land, out of the land, rather, and that is to be given access to Shamayim, to heaven. Since these requirements and transformation from the three-dimensional physical being to the seventh-dimensional spiritual being, the subsequent enrichment, empowerment, and liberty exceeds our comprehension. I know it does mine, but I like to try to think about it. What had been deprived will now be restored, and there will be a new day and a different and better outcome in Yisrael. I'm not going to go any further on that. That was just a little introduction, but that does set the tone of where we had come from and why. Now, Dee, I'm sure you agree with me here, but the reason this information is available to you today, he said, I'm not going to tell you anymore. You will mess it up, you'll turn it around, and I just won't be able to fix it. So he walked away from it, as you recall, last week when we were talking, when Craig was reading. And he was saying that this is a timeout. Well, there's the timeout. We just read about that. But now you can read it. And why can you read it? Well, I'm going to go back. I think we actually covered this, but I'm going to cover it one more time. And now we're back to where we were with Yashayahu in Isaiah. And if you need a location, it is chapter 9, verse 6. You have raised up and enabled a Gentile. You have increased the capacity of the Goy through the magnification and amplification. Well, let me just stop for just a second. I never saw anybody until I ran across Yada Yahowah 15 years ago, and I'm sitting here, and he's amplifying this stuff and telling everything it could be, and then he gives his commentary on why. And context, it has to be this versus that, or it could be this or the other. He's very open. He'll say, if I'm not sure, here it is. His probabilities are this. So I've never seen anything like it. And I've got all these theological books sitting on my shelf inherited from my family. And I'm going, whew. So this is the going. The applications, rearing him up as if he was your own offspring, empowering and enabling, expanding the ability of the individual who is ethnically unrelated and who comes from a different place and a different time. Well, the place can't be Israel, and it has to be far, far into the future as we are now. Equipping the Gentile to continue the mission, or alternately, you have increased the nation person. This is in the hypoperfect second person, masculine singular. Yahweh is responsible for enabling this lone Goy at this time, empowering him such that he begins to reflect Yahweh's nature and intent through applications for a limited period. We've all of those who've been reading this for years know this is it. Without boasting or exalting yourself, nor improperly speaking of favors you sought to bestow. The delight they will joyfully express as they approach your presence will be comparable to the jubilation experienced during the harvest, consistent with rejoicing over the favorable circumstances when they are apportioned that which is valuable. Long ago, now if you want to jump in, that's quite all right from time to time. Just interrupt me. Don't worry about it, okay?
I don't want to cut off your reading flow there because you're doing a very good job.
Okay, well, I'm not the best reader in the world, and that's too bad.
Yep.
I'll blame it on my Alabama
I think you're
heritage.
doing great.
Okay. Adequate. I appreciate that.
This is great.
So long ago, well, that's this. I read this stuff. I've been working on this stuff all week, and I won't go into great detail on any of these words other than what's really pertinent because I've gone through it. And the reason I do that, I'm sure as you do, Dee, is I would like to know if I read something to someone or I tell something to someone that I am totally sure that I've done everything I can do to find his translations to be correct. When I find things that are troubling to me, and I almost called him about to rock, and I knew I'd seen it somewhere. It took me a while to find it. When I ran across a few things as we went for all these years, I've been had the privilege of working with him. Is that I want to know that debate me, send me your verse. I mean, send me your thing and tell me what you think is wrong, and we'll go through it. And it's so the commentary long while ago, let me start again if I may. Long ago, while the Torah was being revealed, Yahweh agreed with the children of Israel, promising that he would no longer speak directly to them, but instead through men like Moshe. They had found his presence and voice to be intimidating. Remember, he talked out real loud and it scared them to death, which is opposite of what God had sought. Yeah, and I probably would have, if I'd come out of this place where they came out, I would probably go, oh, and that's okay. And so he would
thought a lot about that because
you
know how Job wrote that Yahweh's voice is similar to thunder, like just the description of the rumbling and hearing this rumbling on this mountain, and you've just come out of a very dramatic, exodus, Yatsa, across, being chased by Pharaoh and then chased by other people picking you off, and it's I'm sure they were terrified. And they didn't know their dad. And
no.
But I'm sure how heartbreaking that was for Yahweh. I mean, when you've witnessed all of these events at the time, the plagues, and you know how powerful this powerful hand is leading you out, and you just can't get past the fear. It would be disheartening.
Well, you have children, and if they were scared of you, there was, it's no place where he says to fear him unless you're against him. I mean, revere, yes. I mean, Moshe revered that what he saw up on the mountain that was burning, and but it was wow. I mean, and I'd probably be shaking in my boots a little bit, but it's not. It's just nervous energy more than anything else. About like it is when I come on this show.
I know.
a lot of nerves. But no, I would. He's welcome, but I get his point. So to continue, and yet knowing that he had to address them as if they were, if any were to come home for a finite time. God trained the goy such that he could represent the Almighty in an unpretentious manner. He's talking about here. This is the second Yatsa. This is the second Exodus. We know what happened in the other one, Moshe, and now he's being called out through this goy. They are being called out through this goy, who spends his life translating these, the Torah and the Mizmor and the prophets, the Nabi, and so that we can read this and build a relationship with Yah. And so this is what he's referring to. And then he said, and his prophets would scribe his revelations, and his witnesses would share them. That's what we're doing. Such that to hear God speak, we have to pay attention, be observant, and to listen carefully. From that long section on Choreb, it could be Horeb or Choreb, that's a chet. He has a CH sound or a hard H, little H sound. Choreb, when his voice... Well, I do it, but it's there's you have that leeway both ways. But but when his voice boomed at the top of the mountain through 500 BC with Malachi, Yahweh communicated with his people through Nabi prophets, and they were always Israelites and Yehudims like Moshe, Dod, and Yashayahu. I think he likes to work with people. I think he gets a great kick out of it. So I hope he does. I mean, I can't find any reason that he wouldn't. I mean, the whole point of having a relationship is to work with people.
I think if it weren't for that, what would be the point of all of this? So why bother?
Well, I mean,
otherwise,
he can. If you just want to boss people around, it ain't no big deal.
Exactly.
There's nothing. You don't get anything out of it, But then his people stopped listening to him, and that's what we just were addressing over there in Hosea. God's voice was drowned out by those men. Over the next 2,500 years, Yahweh searched the world to find one Yehud among his chosen who would respond, but there was nothing but a deafening silence. Not a single Israelite was interested in shunning religion to pursue a relationship with God. If I may throw a little commentary in here just for a second, do something when you have some time. Write down, take a piece of paper and put a line down the middle. Look on one side, write down everything Yahweh offers, like free will, life eternal, travel, unlimited travel, Having been on an airplane not too long ago, believe me, yes, this time of travel is going to be fine. Relationship, you have unlimited energy. And then right down on the right-hand side, religion and governments give you. And it'll be a short list and a lousy list. And, I mean, come on. Examine the offer, the 5 terms and conditions, and choose. Where were we? However, it would be the first time Yahweh would move a nation to a single ill-equipped individual. On a similar occasion, and as a prelude to the earlier Yatsa Exodus, he confronted the most egotistical nation on earth to retrieve his people using a stuttering shepherd. It worked last time, why not this time? Although to properly calibrate our expectations on the previous occasions, only 2 of the 600,000 who God sought to rescue actually made it to the promised land. And even that took 40 years. Had to reset. This time we'd only have 32 years, and while Yada is a far cry from Moshe, the potential audience has grown 30-fold. Pretty remarkable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a lot to help for you. Like, where are we sending out today? Is that going to somewhere?
Egypt.
Egypt.
We are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
We've
had
some really great responses, so they're hearing us.
Yes. Maybe we can address that a little later.
Sure.
This known, the mission is forecast, or whatever you feel comfortable with until you put it all together. This known,
you're the boss.
The mission. Okay. This known, the mission is forecast to be successful. Those who are willing to listen will be delighted with where the journey together has led. The final harvest may be small, but it will be joyous, and it will be enriching too, as all that is Yah's is given to give is lavished upon his children. All that is Yah is lavished upon his children. Wow. As we now move forward, we find God speaking in a single individual or family being liberated, freed of financial, religious, and political burdens. With that in mind, the last singular masculine reference here to Ha-Goy, the Gentile, and the family. For the constraints of this burdensome labor and that which is associated with the staff of religious influence continually upon his back, especially early on, you have diminished and even eliminated because you dislike these things, along with the scepter of government authority over him. If this is addressing the Goy, the Gentile, rather than the family, while not in his league, the foreigner may have been solicited based upon the same criteria Yahweh used to select Moshe, the one who draws out. Moshe, or Moses, knew nothing about Yahweh, not even his name, at least at the time of his calling. Abraham didn't either, by the way. But he had a keen understanding of the political, religious, military, and economic forces at play in Mizraim. The depravity of the man's way is readily discernible to those who have rejected such deceptions. While this may seem odd to us, the reason Yahweh prefers this approach is that while he enjoys teaching us everything we need to know about his Torah, his Mikres, and his Bereth, his family covenant, he prefers not to talk about religion and politics. Now, this is interesting. I wanted to comment on something, especially if they can be avoided. Such notions are counterproductive and annoying. Now, he can't stand to be around it.
Yeah.
Yahweh. He said, you can't come around me with this stuff. He don't want to engage in it. And I thought on this when I read this. I thought, Doe's coming back 5 days between Kippurim and Sukkah. Mm-hmm. So in that 5 days, he comes back as light. He comes back with as bright as we were expecting to see Yahweh. Yahweh, I don't think returns then till Sukkah because he can't stand this stuff.
Yeah, Dode's going to clean up the yard.
Dode's going to clean up. Yeah, it's always very clear that in what we've already studied multiple times, he's going to clean it all up. So isn't it interesting? I can't stand this stuff. So think about being religious and trying to approach him. Are you kidding? He can't even stand to be around it to clean it up. Go clean that stuff up, and then I'll show up.
Yes.
I could be wrong on that, but that's what I'm getting from it.
I mean, it makes sense. And it's also a point of, if we are working with Yahweh together as family, and I know I personally would love to smash some religious buildings that have oppressed people I love, and dismantle these oppressive establishments that have tormenting itself for thousands of years. I mean, imagine Dode's passion and zeal for this task. I think, little kids, they love to go out with a hammer and smash stuff with Dad. So,
do your kids do that?
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm outside in a project, I give them a piece of wood and a hammer, and they're over there just making and destroying stuff, and they have a ball. And I think Dode has a reason to be to do this job on behalf of Yahweh. As if you love Yahweh, you're going to be offended for him because of how egregious the crimes against the way they've made Yahweh this monster, this unknowable creature that is just narcissistic and vile and unlovable completely. And then when you know Yahweh, it's just the complete opposite. It makes me angry. I can imagine Dode is just ready to do this job.
No. Yes, I mean, Moving forward a few thousand years and on the cusp of the final Exodus, God's predilections have not changed. Therefore, with his glory in a similar situation, this would also explain why we find God working to diminish his economic burdens as well as to rein in the religious and political influences on him. To be of any value to Yah, God would need to have his undivided attention, because there would be a lot to him to learn. Fortunately, the information Yahweh wants him to convey was already available. With the distractions out of the way, all he would have to do is to invest the time needed to learn. That said, the story he would report would not be about himself, nor even about Gentiles, but instead about Yahweh's relationship with the most interesting man in the world, Dode.
Yep.
Our assessment brings us face to face with a number of vital questions. Should we follow the shepherd into the fold or the lamb to the slaughter? That's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, I've never heard anybody say that. Have you ever heard in your life? Have you?
I have. Yes. Christians are obsessed with following Jesus and bearing.
No. I'm saying, have you ever heard anybody put it? No. Have you ever heard that question? You want to follow the shepherd into the fold or the lamb to the slaughter?
Oh no, I've never heard anyone ask that.
That's a
They're also
concept
busy
you just
lining
don't.
up.
They'll. Who is the son who was given? Who is the man who valiantly defended God's people? Who is speaking for God? Who is the counselor? Is Yahweh drawing our attention to Dode, who is conveniently named in this prophecy? So sad to be able to miss that. Is this Dode is conveniently named in this prophecy, or is it Yosha who is not? From the historical perspective, who at the time Yashayahu is writing had been the most prominent person in the life of Israel, David or Jesus? Which individual nobody like Dode. Nobody's going to be like Dode, and let's see, we'll get to that in just a second. Properly presented and accurately cited are Yehudim's most likely to follow out of political and religious Babylon and back into the relationship with Yahweh. Well, it ain't going to be Jesus. Good for them if they catch on.
Yeah.
In the battle of the ideas between the world's most popular religion and the truth, our perceptions of Dode serve as a fulcrum upon which everything pivots. Central to the debate is whether this prophecy pertains to the Son of God or to the Son of Man, to the Messiah or the Melech, Ra'ah, or to the Pesach El. Cognizant of the fact that Israel hinges on Yahweh's guidance, might this phraseology about the Goy have been placed in the preamble to Yahweh's single most misunderstood and misappropriated prophecy to help help us to answer these questions. Addressing this word as Yah intended provides the means to unravel and misguide mythos of replacement theology. the most debilitating and duplicitous influence on humankind. By accurately translating this prophecy, for example, we were ultimately able to unravel the lie which lurks in the heart of Christian religion. For the first time in over 2,000 years, words and insights which have eluded man's grasp would be acknowledged. In the process, Yahweh would become known to more Yehudim prior to his return than would have otherwise occurred. So in a small way, this very declaration may be helpful for fulfilling as an aspect of Yahweh's promise to Abraham. The realization that none of this would require another prophet. And that's the truth. I mean, all the prophets have written it, just nobody reads it. And most of them don't speak English. So somebody's got to translate it, and then somebody's got to go back to the original language and find out, yeah, that's right. And that's the beauty and the fun of doing this. I mean, you will be thrilled with what you find. Some of it's hard. Sometimes you got to look all night. Then you go, oh, duh, there it is.
Oh, yeah.
But other than that, that's my only complaint. Yeah.
It took me a year of just reading this material and comparing it to, I mean, it takes more than all night for some of us. I'm a little slow on the uptick, but if you do put in the time, you will have the reward.
Mm-hmm. It's really fun. It's backbreaking sometimes, but it's really fun.
It really is.
So back to this, let me reread that. The realization that none of this would require another prophet or an additional revelation is especially relevant because it means that the truth has always been available to God's people, even if it went unnoticed. It means that the Goy isn't a prophet, but instead a devoted translator and with an inquisitive mind. So let's read on a little bit. And as in the day of Midian, of questionable, which means of questions regarding judgment. Surely since every boot of marching armies is part of the commotion and the clamor of battle, and since the attire is defiled by wallowing in blood, they will come to exist as fuel to be burned up in the fire and of the blazing light of radiant energy. Now, think about what we were just talking about a minute ago. I'm going to read his commentary in just 1 second, but think about when Dode returns, he's going to be confronted with, well, if not Dode on the second part, but in the first part, this could apply to both the Magog War or the last war in the last 3 years. But the same result. There is a burning, blazing, radiant energy light that will show up and destroy the enemies of Israel. For Christians, this for Christians to misappropriate this prophecy presented in the next statement, they must disregard the realization that it is introduced by an overt reference to Midian, and that speaks of a loud and bloody army that is incinerated by God. They did not occur in conjunction with Yahushua's birth in 2 BCE, nor in the years prior to 33 CE. It has not transpired at any time in our past. It will not occur prior to Dode's return with Yahweh in 2033, year 6,000 Yah. Christians simply ignore this portion of the prophecy because it doesn't fit their guy. And while ignorance may be the path to faith, it does not lead to Yah. According to the text, Yahweh's light is going to incinerate every soldier in the world upon his return. Be forewarned, do not enlist, do not participate in, do not equip, do not support any military force, because it will put you in opposition to Yahweh. I think this is so timely. We just celebrated July 4th, and if you walk around my neighborhood, I assume yours, the flags are waving, the Patriots are there, we throw off some, everybody's shooting up fireworks, celebrating, blowing things up, I guess, in war. And there's signs on the windows. My son is a Marine. My family, I have people in my family who are in the Army. I can't reach them. They don't care. God hates armies. God does not support troops. He does not take sides in human conflicts. He is not patriotic or pro-military. Quite the opposite. He is going to obliterate everyone in uniform and everything used to conduct war. In a nation like America, which is home to 40% of the Jews worldwide, and where any reluctant to support the armed forces and salute the flag is considered an egregious offense against the country, and they do.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't grow up with that.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with that. Truly, I didn't. I did grow up part of my life in Australia, and we had to sing "God Save the Queen," and I just got tired of getting in fights. So I said, no, God Save the Queen. Okay. Every day before school started, but no. But Yahweh's overt hostility towards those things is good news. Returning to Midian.
Isn't good news.
Isn't good. I'm sorry. It's not good news. Returning to Midian, of the 24 times din appears in the Hebrew text, 5 are in parallel with Shaphat, to decide by being discerning, which is to exercise good judgment. It is twice used in the conjunction with the Mishpat and the Midian, somewhat equivalent. Therefore, it is fair to say that Midian serves as a referendum on the ability to think. I'm going to throw one little side note in here, too, for people who are listening that may, for the first time, be reading this. You need to find a interlineary. I didn't even know what an interlineary was. I knew what a lexicon was, but I didn't know what interlineary was. And what that is it has everything lined up, and I'm using a Masoretic text, which is about 85% accurate, and I know what's wrong. And you'll get that after a while if you don't know. But it'll have it in order the way it's written in Hebrew. But it'll have a number of signs for it, so you can click on those or look them up in most all of your lexicons, and you can decide for yourself whether these are excellent translations.
I have like 3.
As for the yeah, do you?
They're really
I've got 2, but the ones online are the best only because I can click them here and go there, and then any words that I can't find an expanded group of words, so I can go and say, okay, I see this, and this is why, and then you look at the context and you can look at the grammar and things like that, and before you know it, it's the only place I've ever been to, D, where this goy. This Yada, who is writing this stuff, is telling you how to do what he does.
Right.
Look at it.
So
go
true.
check it. And I know James on his site. I mean, for years, working with James all these years, he would say, "Go look it up. Here it is, and here it is." And he's got a whole thing on his site about more lexicons and more things. We even did a couple of shows together one time about those things. Filled in for a while, whatever, I can't remember exactly, but we covered a lot of that ground as well. So you're not out there. You don't have to take it to face value. Go check it out. I like JB's saying.
Yes. I totally agree.
Moshe fled. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to reiterate really your point about Craig. His books, they're not only useful for helping you learn how to translate, but they're repetitive and they're consistent, which is what you need to learn another language. And he does this throughout every volume. The consistency is astounding. So if you really want to learn how to pick this up, just pick up the book and read, and it will just start making sense as you go, even if you just keep pushing.
Well, I had a bit of a problem at first. I thought I should learn Hebrew, and I'll be honest with you, I know more Hebrew words than most people know Hebrew words, but I can't go down and buy a loaf of bread at a shop in Israel because I would get all... I could pick up some pidgin Hebrew, and do that. And here's what turned me off. I knew that they were using vowel points to change the pronunciation. Yeshua is not a word. Yosha is a word. Yeshua is not a word. Even Yahweh is not a good pronunciation. There's no merit for it. There's no real explanation for it. Where the hey all of a sudden becomes an EH instead of an AH. And one thing you want to try to do is the best of your ability is to when you say Yahweh's name, that you pronounce it correctly. And I mean, I'm a Southerner, so he cuts me a little slack because I have a hard time with most English words. So,
accents are forgivable, but even across accents and across languages, a transliterated name will be the same.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, you watch TV and the president's name, if it's what's that guy's name, Biden, it'll come out Biden, and they always use they transliterate names, they translate words.
Yeah, we use titles and names across languages. But apparently, God doesn't get that kind of respect around here.
He doesn't. No, not around here. Well, he will around here, but he won't anywhere else.
Maybe with us, but not around this earth and the religious leaders.
No.
I talked to a rabbi one time, and he told me that he already knew Yahweh's name, but that it wasn't for me, that I didn't need to concern myself with it, that it wasn't for him. Yes.
What if you wanted to know him?
Still have he claims that we aren't really meant to know him, that it's just for the Jews, and this is what Craig talks about, the rabbi's attitude being very off-putting, and this is where a lot of hostility towards Jews comes from. And
okay, so we're going. I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, well, he told me that the name wasn't my concern and that he already knew it, and I told him, I was like, then why do you hide it? And he said that, out of respect, that whole spiel. And I told him the only thing men seek throughout history and time is for their name to be preserved in stone, some of them. And this is how they've equated it in ancient cultures like Rome. If you wanted to be immortal, your name needed to live on. You needed to do something big. Well, Yahweh's done something enormous, but he doesn't get to live forever in the minds of men. And they've hidden him in the closet along with Dode, and they don't see any value in keeping his name and legacy alive. And I said, is that you respecting your God? And he couldn't answer my question.
No. He probably asked you to go away. Let me ask you a question.
Actually. He blocked me.
Let me ask you a question. It's rhetorical, of course. You know the answer. I mean, it's an open book test for those of us who read this stuff. If that's true, it's only there for Yehudim. What do you do with Abraham? Was Abraham a Yehudim? Was he even
they don't
Israelite?
Like to talk about those details.
was Yishak?
Not so Jacob.
No.
There was no such thing.
No. Jacob changed his name to Yisrael, but he didn't have any children at that point. So after he had 12 children, one of them becomes Yehuda and the rest of them became Yisrael. All of them were Yisrael. Yehuda is Yisrael. All Yisrael is not Yehudim. You got 10 tribes to the north, and so they're not allowed to say his name because every time I read, Moshe said they said it all the time. Anyway. And also, he told Abraham, if anybody among you is a Gentile, and that must have come strange to to Abraham, because he was a Gentile. He just walked out of Babylon with his wife, who was also Babylonian. He said, anyone who is a Gentile that's there with you and wants to agree to the covenant, the 5 terms and conditions, which are found in the story with Abraham, then they, of course, can be part of the family by adoption. And they ought to know their daddy's name, too. So, I mean, this is just so crazy and convoluted. I want to go just throw my hands up and say, what's wrong with you people? As for the land of Midian, it is first mentioned in Shemuth Names 2:15. Moshe fled to this place as an act of conscience. He walked away from the leadership position within the dictatorial government, which was overwhelmingly religious, aggressively militant, and oppressive in its imposition of a caste system. Everything seems to have a caste system. As such, he sojourned to Midian and is symbolic of disassociating ourselves from the same corrosive institutions today. It is a call for God's people to walk away from modern manifestations of religious, political, and geographic Babylon. Babylon didn't last very long, but it's the symbol of Babylon, which is religion, politics, and military and economic schemes. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Europe and the United States, and to the Middle East walk away from their way of thinking. Had Abraham not left Babylon, God would not have led him to the Promised Land. Had the children of Israel not left Mizraim, God would not have led them back to Israel by way of Midian. Similarly, the Jews who remain bound to their religion, their political party, or their place within the foreign land will be excluded from the remnants who witness Yahweh's return with King David. Therefore, knowing what we are leaving and why is nearly as vital as realizing where we're going. And to appreciate this, it's important to recognize that Mount Horeb, or Horeb if you like, is in Midian, the first point of safety after fleeing Mizraim. It is the place where the Torah was revealed and Israel listened directly to Yahweh. It was in Midian that Moshe first came to gather the shepherd and the sheep, to gather and shepherd the sheep. It is where Yahweh reached out to Moshe and asked him to help liberate his people. Isn't that interesting? I mean, listen to the way that is. He asked him to help me liberate these people. That is so cool. What a guy. There is no better place or more fitting preparation for serving Yahweh's children. It was in Midian that Moshe, an Israelite, was welcomed and supported by a Gentile. After he and his Midianite wife gave birth to the first son, Gershon, Moshe said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. Indeed, every Gentile adopted into the covenant comes to realize that this applies to us as well. When Yahweh found Moshe in Midian, he appeared to be an odd choice for the worldly perspective. He had left Egypt, where he lived like royalty. The Hebrew slaves he had risked everything to save from the oppressive regime. Rather than show their appreciation for his sacrifice, they turned against him. It would be a harbinger of the relationship between Yahweh and Israel. Nevertheless, Moshe had shown great courage, character, and compassion in opposing the religious and political establishment, which had made life so degrading for everyone apart from Pharaoh's family and the priest. It would be predictive of what Roman Church would do to Jews and their own throughout Europe. As an Israelite among Gentiles, Moshe witnessed how cruel men become when they are molded by their nation. He had also experienced just how unappreciative and disloyal the Israelites can be. But then he also saw that an individual boy can be moral and welcoming. And while these experiences shaped this individual, he was an 80-year-old man with a speech impediment. So if I fumble over my words, I'm in good company. He was out tending sheep in a God-forsaken corner of the Arabian desert when Almighty God chose this lone individual to convey his name and word to the world. So by let's think about that. That contradicts everything rabbis believe. So by man's standard, Moshe was an odd choice to liberate the children of Israel from religious and political bondage. Nonetheless, the Yatsa, the Exodus, from Mizraim actually began in Midian. Subsequently, the people's return to the Promised Land was made possible by what transpired in this place with the revelation of the Torah. I think that's so cool. He started there, he called it there. The light was burning on the top in the rocks. And he took him there. They came back, and he delivered the Torah. Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Also relevant.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Also relevant, Gideon delivered the Israelites from Mennonite oppression by following God's direction. Yahweh told Gideon, and I know the Gideon study, this was a good, I even drew some paintings about Gideon, one, that he didn't want the Israelites to attack the Mennonites with 32,000 men. If you read the story, you know where it's going, but instead with 300. So the people in East sorted them out, and he said, no, just 300. That the people would know that their freedom wasn't a byproduct of military might. It would be achieved by relying upon the instruction. And it is a lesson lost on nations, including America and Israel.
Absolutely right.
You ain't kidding. Well, I mean, there would have been none of this confusion to begin with if it trusted just somebody, just a few people. It didn't even take the whole nation. Just somebody would stand up and say, this is what Yahweh said. I'm going to kumbaya. I'm going to stand with Yah. Anyway, most especially, it was a Midian that we were first introduced to Yahweh, and so perhaps this was with this reference to this place in advance of the prophets that Yehudim will be reintroduced to the realization their God has a name. Well, that would be different. We're now in Shemoth, or Names 3:2. Now Moshe was shepherding the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he guided his flock to that which comes after the wilderness, and came to Korb, the mountain of God. Then the Malach, messenger of Yahweh, was seen appearing to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a protruding precipice. He looked and beheld a sharp crag was ablaze and burning, and he was not consumed. That's where I spent all last night for about an hour and a half. Until I finally said, I got to get out my big heavy books and get rid of, because you go through all this stuff, and it's everything from a blackberry bush to a thorny bush. And I'm going, get away. It's not. It's the great big craggly mountain, sharp points and burning ablaze. That would stop you in your tracks. Sorry, I'm interrupting myself.
Can I tell you something funny?
Sure.
A long time ago, I was looking at names, and I looked up Craig Wynn just to be goofy, and his name actually means light shining from a rock.
Really doesn't?
Yes. I would never, tell him about that, make him uncomfortable, but just privately, I find that another correlation.
I think you're in trouble now.
Yeah, I probably am.
Yeah.
Anyway,
if you get to know Craig, you will find one wonderful thing about him. He's one of the nicest, most generous people I've met. He is genuine. Moshe said, "I would prefer to go in a different direction." I can relate to this, changing my approach, because I want to inspect and understand this empowerment enormously important sight, contemplating the incombustible nature of a sharp, craggly rock. Okay, that was kind of like, I would probably be saying, I want to change my direction and get away. With Moshe. When Yahweh saw that he had turned to inspect what he had seen, God called him out, offering him a welcoming invitation to meet from the midst of the sharp, craggy rock, saying, Moshe, Moshe. So he said, Behold, it's me. Then he said, Do not come near this place. If you wouldn't mind, detach your sandals. He's polite. Yahweh's polite. He does that. A lot of times he says, please, of your own volition. He does everything. Come on, Moshe, let's go. Let's go to Egypt. He really, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but it really is written that way. If you don't mind, detach your sandals from upon your feet, because indeed this site which you are presently standing upon is set apart, Kodesh, once again, Kodesh, and very special ground. Then he said, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Ishak, the God of Jacob. However, Moshe concealed his presence because he was too awestruck to look at God. So he's getting a little nervous. Yahweh said, I have seen the affliction and the harassment of my people who are in the crucible of political and religious oppression in Midian, Egypt. I have heard this distressing cry as a result of those who are exploiting and oppressing them. Indeed, I am aware of their suffering. Therefore, I have descended, coming down from this much higher place, to deliver them from the influences of subjugating tyrants in Midian, and to lift them up out of their country, taking them to a good and pleasing, beneficial and spacious realm, to the land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of Canaan. In his name, that is written with the pictographs, Yahweh's name, it is it is a Yah reaching down. It's so drawn as a hand reaching down with an open hand to grasp, to lift, to hold. It's much like the side view of you when you put your hands and your thumb up and you would lift under your child's arms to lift them up.
Mm-hmm.
That's followed by a hey. In this case, because of where it's placed in the word, the hey is drawn as pretty much a stick figure with the legs apart and the hands reaching up as if to say, in awe of this wonderful sight. And engaged, the hands and the legs are moving. There is a wah in the middle of it, which is depicted as a tent peg. It looks much like we use the letter Y. And that would be a child, the increase of a family is the children. And that was the Y of the two hands reaching up to the mother and to the father. We know it's a mother because the hey that goes in the end is Yahowah. The hey that goes in the end is drawn exactly the same, but the placement on the end of a word turns that word into feminine. Yahweh's name is feminine. Torah is feminine. But the hey down at the end, he has both of these parts. He is both mother and father and has all the attributes in spiritual form. But 25% of his name is dedicated to his name, his Yah, the Y, and the other is dedicated to family. 3/4 of his name is about the family. That should be a clue to somebody.
Yeah.
And he's reaching down to lift you up. That's what he wanted to do in this realm. And if you didn't know his name and you're not allowed to say his name, you're not allowed to write his name, and you have to discard the original way that it was written, what a shame. So behold, the wailing cry of despair from the children of Israel has come to me. It's Yahweh talking. I have seen the starvation rations and the oppressive conditions with which the political and religious despots of Mr. are imprisoning them. As a result, let's go, because I want to extend myself through you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, to the children of Israel, out of this highly questionable affliction and oppression of Mitzrayim. Our reintroduction to Yahweh through Midian is relevant because it demonstrates how desirous God is to remove his people from the caustic and controlling and degrading and incapacitating influence of human governance and institutionalized religion. It's always stop being religious.
Right.
Stop being political. You can't walk to me till you get rid of that. The first term and condition of the 5 terms and conditions of being a member of the covenant is to walk away from Babylon, the symbol of all these things. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard for people. But
it's hard because we've been indoctrinated that way. But when you've done it, you realize I didn't really lose anything. So
it's freeing. It's absolutely freeing. It sets you free.
It's quite burdensome.
You're no longer bound. Well, religion, regular, that's what it is. The root for, or the word in Latin for religion is to be bound.
Yeah, religiare, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
To be bound.
So everything about it is you bow down. You bow down to a Lord. They have to change his name to Lord because he doesn't ask you to bow down. He doesn't ask you to respect. He asks you to respect him. He does, but your fellow human beings, the Loy Cohen, had a wonderful job to do, and they're great teachers, and you respect your teacher, but you never ask them to bow down to them or kiss their ring or any of this kind of stuff that religion does. They ask you to do very specific things, and you always have free will. That's not true of religion and politics.
Right.
I'm going to go back. Our reintroduction to Yahweh through Midian is relevant because it demonstrates how desirous God is to remove his people from this caustic and controlling and degrading, incapacitating influence of human governance and institutional religion, as well as the stratified and oppressive nature of the caste system and slavery. Further, God's approach is so contrary to what men would do. He didn't deploy an army. He didn't dispatch a navy. He didn't send in a vast array of heavenly envoys. He didn't deploy diplomats to negotiate a treaty. He didn't impose economic sanctions that are really already backfiring on us in context of today's. Or offer. I'll cover that one day, maybe in a few weeks, if you want to talk about that. Or offer monetary incentives to those who he knew coveted them. He didn't even engage a popular and imposing, articulate, charismatic, influential, and prestigious individual, but instead solicited the help of a senior citizen. I'm a senior citizen. So I like him already. With a scandalous reputation to liberate his children from religious and governmental.
Do you have a scandalous reputation? I must have.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
I wish.
Sorry, I had to.
I have a reputation to liberate his children from religion and governmental influence in the most powerful nation on earth. There is God's way in man's approach, and seldom do they share anything in common. And that is why Yahweh called this place set apart and special. It is the uncommon place. It is the uncommon God. It's the uncommon relationship. It is nothing like what we're here today and what we've experienced over all these years. In light of this, why would we expect God to change tactics at this late date? Can I just ask you this? I was thinking about the same thing in the first verse that I read from the Yobel chapter, where Moshe says, "This is the deal," and everything we've read from every prophet says the same thing, like good teachers from different angles, so that you'll den it in. Yahweh does everything he can. He is the great teacher. The Torah is teaching, by the way. If the audience doesn't, if some of the people in the audience don't know that, most of the people listening do, but it comes from the root word. It's all Hebrew words are understood through their, by way of their verbal, the nouns by way of their verbal connection. So it tells you the action of that verb, tells you about the noun and what it. So in Yara is the word which means teaching, and Torah is related to the verb. You always understood through that. So if it's understood through that, then you probably ought to think of it not as law, because there are no laws to be obeyed. There's no obey, because then you would have no free will. That's a total logical concept. You cannot have both. And so therefore you couldn't have a Lord. There's not even a word for obey.
Yep.
You know, unless you borrow it from another language. So, but in any case, where we're in light of this, they would not expect God to change his tactics. And the same thing would be, why would there be a New Testament? Why would someone accept rabbis, where there are no such thing as rabbis in the Torah? They're priests, and Eloi and Cohen. We know the history of them. Why would you have to invent new words? We're not inventing new words here. We're just explaining the ones that have already been written. We turn to this section of Shemuth, names, because we are searching to understand Midian. Midian refers to reference in Yasharah 9:5. Little did we expect that it would shed some interesting light on how God goes about choosing those who serve his children. So here we go. But Moshe said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and come out with the children of Israel, bringing them out of the religious and political oppression of Mitzrayim?" So he said, "Because I will be with you. This is the sign and the proof that I have sent you. By you having brought out the family from Mitzrayim, the crucible of affliction and oppression, you will work with God upon this mountain." Well, if they're going to leave the mountain and go there, that's a promise right there. We're going to come back here and we're going to teach them here, and that's where the Torah was delivered. That's where all this knowledge was delivered. So, and he wants to work with people. What's the fun of it? I mean, if not. And that mountain where the Torah was revealed in Midian, it is the place where Jewish judgment comes into question. Anytime there's an M in front of the word, a mem, it means to question, ask what, where, when, why, how, why. You know, what, when, where. Yes. Yahweh obviously wanted to work with someone who knew the Egyptians and who understood and was opposed to their politics, their religion, their military, and economic system. Having experienced these things, and having left them because he dislikes them, made Moshe effective while sparing God the ordeal of having to explain why he was so opposed to that which had subjugated and abused his people. As Roman Catholics and Muslims have done and now progressives are doing, as I suspect, that it humors the Almighty to communicate his name and word to an individual with questionable diction. Good.
That's a little funny. Yeah, I got to laugh at that.
Yeah, Yahweh's funny. And Craig, quite frankly, right, he's become one. I mean, he was good right to begin with. He's really good now. He throws some things in there. If you look, I just, in the middle of the night, I started laughing. I just go, that's funny. Like the tweets the other day. And it means, you know what the word is? But long before there was Twitter, the word translated Twitter.
I heard him. That's just ironic. And they're using it so terribly. And then there's Craig on Twitter with his books.
Uh-huh. Wow.
Yeah.
Having left,
that's really cool.
Now we're back to, having left corporate management, religion, patriotism, and politics, I can picture myself, this is Craig talking in his commentary, in Moshe's shadow, without God having to explain. I understand Yahweh's aversion to these things. His position resonates with me, Craig, and I am sure that it did with Moshe. And while I, Craig, wasn't afforded the opportunity to climb the desolate crags of Cherub, there wasn't any reason to do so. Not now that we find Yahweh ready and willing to talk to us through the words in the Torah, which were revealed upon the mountain. And while it was an individual calling, Moshe would not work alone. Aaron would join him, as would others. In my case, it was Joe, then Jeff, James, now Jackie, David, what's his name? Kirk, Mike, Molly, J.K., and the other always wonderful D, and so many others. This is
it's weird to see my name there. I hadn't read
I
that.
know. I never expect to be in this book, but hey,
Caught
thank
me
you.
Off guard.
Thanks for the shout out. Now I've got to be
I
good.
mean, imagine being Craig and having to write about yourself all the time. He's got to throw us under the bus.
I think he threw us under the bus. Yeah. Take that. It is an honor to participate in whatever we can do. I'm sure we all feel the same. This is why we find
God gets this out is a passion.
Well, I don't want to go meet him and say, you could have done something. I tell you, I could have. If I had children, I'd tell them. I tell all my relatives, and they just say, "No, I like Jesus." I'm going, okay, well. I don't. I'm not laughing. It's a nervous laughter. It's not. I'm not laughing at him. I grew up around Christians all my life, participated in it because I didn't know any better. I couldn't find anything better.
I'm not as nice as you, and I find it laughable because they don't know Jesus. They've never met him.
No, they don't know this myth that is Jesus. Yeah. There was a Passover lamb. Yeah.
Right.
His name was Yoshua. He came, and it was inside his body there was a soul, and that soul belonged to Yahweh. It was created for that moment to do that thing. And because it conveyed the information, Yahweh could feel it while being in the seventh dimension. He could feel what was going on to this body and to this soul and the third dimension. There's science backing all this kind of stuff up, so you get an idea that this is the way it has to work. And that's in many of the books. So he had to feel it, and he had to know it. But he didn't need a soul to be more of himself. He didn't need a soul to be lesser. And if he doesn't have a soul, it wouldn't make him any lesser. Having a soul doesn't make him any more. It is, and I think this was the best thing that helped me because I fought trying to figure this out for a long time. It is a probe like out in space. And that makes the most sense to me. He could feel it.
Yeah.
And we have evidence that he not only felt it and everything, it was articulated to someone, and his name is Dode, and he wrote it in the 22nd Psalm, and he wrote it, I think, in the 88th Psalm as well. So all those things, that is the only, by the way, for the Christian community, that is the only way, or the only time, the only witness in history who actually could record the events. The so-called apostles and his followers weren't there.
Right.
We have no record of them being there, and they certainly didn't write down what it was happening. But Doe did,
right.
And that's in the year about the year 3000. Then let's see, where were we? 313. Then Moshe. That's right. I'll start. It's just a little bit. I'll start these three things because I interrupted myself so much. Then Moshe, the one who draws us away from human oppression, said to God, "Now look, okay." He said, "If I go to the children of Israel," and this is really good. If I go to the children of Israel and I say to them, "The God of your fathers has sent me to you," and they ask me, "What is His name?" What? Now, this is the greatest prophet of all time. The greatest prophet of all time, and he said, "Y'all, what?" He says, "God, what is it?" Because he don't know his name yet. What is it? What I say your name is? What shall I say to him? And God responds to Moshe. He says, "I am, Ihaya, who I am. I exist for all time." That's a permanent word. It's not caught in there. No verbs stuck in time. Then he said, which is part of the same letters in his name. Then he said, three of them. Then he said, "This is what you shall say to the children of Israel. I exist. The I exist has sent me." In addition, right after that, he said, in addition, God said to Moshe, "This is what you should actually and continually say to the children of Israel. Yahweh, the God of your fathers, God of Abraham, God of Yishak, God of Jacob, and sent me to you. This is my name forever, throughout all time." That's going to be Olam. "And this is my way of being known and remembered in every place, era, and generation. For all time is Olam." He said, "This is my name forever." Haya is the verb that explains the noun Yahweh. Everything works the same way. This is Yahweh. Now, why would he tell him to answer that question if he didn't want him to know the name? And right. If you can't pronounce it, the stupidity of somebody trying to say you can't pronounce it, then you can pronounce a whole bunch of other words, much less Torah, Shalom, etc., etc. Moshe's mission would include introducing Yahweh by name to his people, liberating the children of Israel from the religious, political oppression, listening to God, and then sharing what he has learned verbally and in writing. Our mission today is to reinforce Yahweh to his people, to encourage Israelites to flee religion and political influences, and then after translating what God conveys to his prophets, sharing what we have learned verbally and in writing. Our work together has led us to the precipice of what Yahowah is about to reveal, to the same mountain and then to the promised land. We have learned that there is someone who is more important to our well-being and to our approach to God than Moshe or Yosha. The most relevant insight of this relationship comes from Yahweh's beloved Son, his Messiah, and his King, the prophet who shepherded and defended God's people, a Yehudim who was chosen to write the songs which will be sung in heaven. For the past 2,000 years, the world has been wrong about Yahowah 9, 6, and 7, even though it is among the most quoted of all prophecies. It is not predictive of Yosha, errantly called Jesus Christ by Christians, but descriptive of Dode, more commonly known to the king as King David. Based on what is said about him, these implications could not be greater. Rather than follow Jesus, the world ought to have been listening to Dode. Rather than predict the birth of God, rather than justifying Christmas, rather than describe Jesus, rather than validate the Christian religion, Yahowah 9, 6 through 7 obliterates everything Christians have been beguiled into believing. Quite honestly, it's obvious. Now, we will probably go off, not to the people listening, we'll go off for about 5 minutes, but we're coming down to the end here, so I'm going to try to finish this so he can start out fresh next week. So quite honestly, it's obvious. We can learn far more from Dode than Yosha because, number one, and this has always been Yahweh's intent. It is why we possess so much of what Dode wrote, all in the original language, all marvelously preserved, all easily verified. There is more psalm scrolls found in the caves of the Dead Sea than any other. And yet with Yosha, we have almost nothing in Hebrew, the only language he spoke. And what little we do have is hearsay, coming to us by way of translation so carelessly compromised and conveys that very little is credible. That is not by accident. The prophecy affirms that Dowd was the most brilliant, articulate, and insightful man who ever lived. And as the Son of God, the Messiah, the Messiah, the King, he will be returning with Yahweh to shepherd the flock throughout space and time. Simply stated, Yeshayahu 9:6-7 pertains to Dowd and not Yahusha, as so many have been led to believe. And yet these men's lives are intertwined in many ways. Without what one wrote, what the other did is unknown. Yeshayahu inspired revelations fundamentally changed the world's errant perceptions of Jesus Christ, such as Yahusha is no longer viewed as the Son of God, as the Messiah, or as the King, or as our Savior. God was not born. He did not die. And there will be no second coming of Christ. Yahusha was the one that Christians ignored, the Pesach Ayel, thereby opening the doorway to life. My hope is that Yehudim come to recognize him as such. Before we rejoin the prophecy, there are some things that we ought to understand. Yeshayahu, Isaiah 9:6 and 9:7 telescope time in traditional Hebrew fashion, presenting what has been and will occur. It depicts play over a period of 3,000 years, and since the past, present, and future is seen as one, integrate the whole of God's perspective. And 9:6 and 9:7 should never have been broken apart and presented in two distinct thoughts. Therefore, the translator must choose the tense which most accurately reflects the time frames, and being discussed in the transition of Hebrew to English. In this regard, we must pay especially close attention to the conjugation which speaks of things which are completed during a period of time and open-ended and continuous. Now, that may sound a little bit heavy, but it's once again, Yada, Craig, going through the stuff to introduce you to what. But I'm going to read because of time. I guess we have enough time, don't we? Does it? When does it end? Oh,
typically 8:30, okay. I think. You say.
Okay, so I think I've lost my place. Where was I?
Oh, we just ended on.
What's the next line? For indeed, the child. Yeah.
Open-ended and continuous. Also, adjectives follow nouns.
Adjectives follow nouns. Yes. Yeah, and I'll do that very, very quickly because it's just a difference in the language. You say Ruach Kodesh, which is in the Hebrew is the spirit set apart, but in English we have to say the set apart spirit, and then things of that. Wonderful counselor instead of is similar, but a valiant, heroic defender of God, not Almighty God. So this is where they changed everything by just reverting back to they're using English, they're changing it from the Hebrew and not being faithful to the Hebrew. In addition, Shem is more than a name. It is also conveys an individual renowned reputation. And as you addressed a little earlier, I share this because there's only one actual name among the 7 historic and 7 prophetic portrayals of the individual's nature and value, and that is Dowd. Therefore, what follows is profoundly different. And last night I went through all of these things, and you can too, and you'll find, wow, that's where they screwed up. And he's totally justified in doing it this way.
Yes, I've done
Therefore, what follows is profoundly different and yet more accurate presentation of Yeshayahu 9:6 and 9:7 than any you have seen before. The opening stanza must be more memorable, may be the most memorable ever spoken. Here we go. For indeed, a child was born before us, a son was provided and placed concerning us. The opportunity to learn that what can be known about how to engage and endure in addition to the government was and will be on his shoulder. His reputation and renown has been read and recited as a counselor providing valuable advice, who is astonishingly brilliant and amazingly insightful, a valiant and heroic individual with a prominent military and political standing in the community of God and an eternal witness providing enduring testimony for the Father the leader who conveys the authorized position on reconciliation and restoration leading to salvation, tremendously increasing the ability to learn about and respond to the means to engage and endure, to be liberated and empowered. As a result of this approach, reconciliation and restoration, complete satisfaction and total contentment without end will be without end upon the throne of Dowd, as well as upon his kingdom through his considered advice and counsel, so as to be prepared and established by it, and to be restored and sustained by it, with the means to exercise good judgment and justly resolve disputes, Shabat, by being right from then to now and forevermore. This deep devotion and passion of Yahweh, of the vast array of spiritual influence to Saba, have consistently engaged to make this happen. At this time of this writing, circa 700 BCE, the declaration a child was born before us would naturally have pertained to Dowd, but not Yosha. The child was not only conceived and born in the normal fashion, in the perfect conjugation, this life could not have been eternal. And we considered the statement, the Son was provided concerning us. We should turn our attention to the one man of whom Yahweh stated, He is my Son, I am his Father. Of course, that's Dowd. Yahweh placed the governance of Israel on Dowd's shoulders. He made him the king. He chose him to shepherd his people. I always call him the shepherd king. Anointed him a Messiah to demonstrate his authorization. He did it. He did it 3 times, and then appointed him Melech, king. Further, in this case, the verb haya was ascribed in the imperfect, indicating that what had been done would be secure throughout time. It goes on and on and on. The imperfect is an ongoing situation. Dowd is not only the most obvious and most qualified individual, he is the only man who will be king. This also disqualifies Yosha from consideration. Those who have read the Mizmor know the counselor providing valuable advice, who is astonishingly brilliant, amazingly insightful. This is the shepherd's role and not the lamb's. When he comes to providing brilliant advice, thought-provoking guidance, and valuable insight, Dowd is in a class by himself.
Yep.
If
that was really well said.
If we had an extant text written by Yosha in Hebrew, carefully, copiously preserving as we do with Dowd, then both men might qualify, but we don't have a single word written by Yosha. While in comparison, there's more parchments devoted to Mizmor Psalms preserved among the Dead Sea Scrolls than anything else by God. Gabor, let me see how far this is down. I'm going to skip just a little bit down because of time. And the commentary is he'll go on to explain that about human history, the leader of the authority was Dowd. He will go on to say it's hard to miss the connection between Dowd and Shalom because his son is the last king to rule over unified Israel. Solomon, his son. But after that, it all fell apart and it's never been put back together. By serving the Passover lamb, Yosha opened the door to life, but unlike Dowd, he did not explain how we should respond to the gift. Those who listen to the response of Dowd's song are Shalom, reconciled and satisfied. If you want the answers, read the Torah, read the prophets, read Dowd.
Yes.
Prophetic betrayal concludes with Yahweh acknowledging that he has personally and consistently gained throughout time to make this happen. Because his kina, deep devotion and passion, his strong desire to accomplish something special as a result of his love for Dowd, the beloved, that's what Dowd means, considered that it was Yah's kina, fervor for exclusivity and ardent love, which lies at the heart of his relationship with his son. When Christians transferred this promise to Jesus Christ, it had to make his father, who loved his son, angry. May I ask anyone still lost in religion, if this was about baby Jesus, why did Yahweh dispatch this statement to Israel, to the very people that Christian Jesus allegedly rejected? If we are to believe that this was about Christianity, why was the gift allotted to Jews? Yahweh said, this is 9:8, Yahweh dispatched the word unto Jacob, Israel. And so it had been allotted to Israel. That's what Jacob changed his name to. The individuals who engage and endure with God from Salah El. This prophecy is a love story. It's a genuine treasure. And yet for thousands of years, it has not been used to validate it has been used to validate a hateful religion while besmirching the loving relationship Yahweh had intended.
Yes.
That is, if you would like to read it in person, it's in chapter 11 called Nathan, the Gift Upon His Shoulders. It is remarkable translations.
And this is the Shana years book of the Yada Yahowah series.
Yes, exactly. Okay. And I love the site. I mean, you can go there now and I can read all this stuff. And there it is. You've got all the Moeds. And that's where I found number 2, the second chapter was Yobel. And that's where the first statement was that was so fascinating to me.
Yes.
The message is for Yisrael. The message is for people who want to become Yisrael. It is to tell the Yehudim for the second Exodus, the Yatzah, come home, walk away from politics, religion, and the military, and the things that are so common in Kodesh. There are 5 terms and conditions, and they're not hard, and they're all beneficial. Well, Dee, that's about all I got.
All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to come on tonight, and I do hope Craig feels better next week.
Yes, we all do. Please believe me.
COVID is no fun.
No, and I will continue my role as over there in the corner and say something every once in a while and be fun. I get to listen. But thank y'all for putting up with me, and thank you, Dee, once again, and thank you, Yada, for trusting me and doing this. Thank you, Craig, and I wish you all happy Shabbat and Shalom.
Happy Shabbat, Kirk. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks.
No problem. Bye.
Bye.